Hi, I'm Kathy from Stitch It Together. Today I'm going to be binding my spring-themed Disappearing 9-patch quilt. To do this, I'm going to do something that maybe is a little bit conventional, but this is a really good idea if you're a new quilter. Did you know that you don't have to have corners on your quilt? Because you don't. When you're binding a quilt, there's some special maneuvers you need to take when you get to the corner, but you can avoid that altogether if you just use like a plate, anything round, and a rotary cutter, and cut off those corners, make them round. There's no rule that says you have to have mitered corners. So I hope you'll watch and see what I'm going to be doing today. I have a special foot that I use when I'm binding my quilts, and thank you for watching. So I didn't use anything technical, just this plate and a rotary cutter, and I just simply went around the edge so that I have no more corner. And I did that to all 4 corners, and I did 2 at a time. You could certainly do 1 at a time and you would get the same results. So now that I don't have any corners, I'm going to apply the binding. And I want to show you something that I'm going to use to apply my binding that a lot of quilters don't have. This is called a binding attachment. It's a little bit different than a foot. You can see it's much bigger than a foot. And what this is going to allow me to do is, instead of sewing the binding on one side and then mitering the corners and then flipping it over and tacking it down and sewing it again, or hand stitching, some people then turn it over, flip that binding over and then hand stitch it. This is going to allow me to machine stitch in one step the entire binding at once. So the reason that I have not taken off the corners and I've rounded those corners is that while I love this, it is extremely hard to learn how to miter your corners with this attachment. I've had it about 9 months and I am very proficient at it now, but it does take me some time when I get to the corners. So it had always been my intention is that once I learned how to do this, that maybe I would be able to rent this machine with the attachment out, and then people could bind their quilts that way because it's just so fast. But those corners are going to be a problem in that if you are only coming every now and again to use this machine, those corners are really going to be an issue. So I have learned that if you don't miter the corners and you make your corners round, that really is an option. And I think that this way I will be able to rent this machine out. So one of the differences with the binding with this is that while the standard binding is about 2.5 inches wide, and there really is no set amount, but most of the tutorials you'll find, they use a 2.5 inch binding. This one requires 3 inches. And you just do it exactly the same. It's just 3 inches instead of 2.5 inches. If you're a new quilter and you don't have this foot, it still might be a good idea to take those corners off. Learning how to miter the corners, it's just a step that you don't have to take when you're just beginning. If you get stuck at those corners, you might not finish your quilt. And wouldn't you rather have a finished quilt than one that is sitting waiting for the binding and you don't know how to do it? So I'm going to say there would be a lot of reasons to not have mitered corners, and being a new quilter, or this is another good reason, so that you don't have corners for whatever reason. If you don't want to have a corner, you don't have to have one. There's no quilt police. You don't have to have a mitered corner. I'm going to try and show you what it looks like when I use this machine, but I honestly, I've never tried to record myself sewing before, so my apologies in advance to what this might look like. This is my machine, which is a Husqvarna Opal, and I believe that this is probably the lowest model Husqvarna that you can use this attachment with. Because it's the lowest model, I do in fact need to have the walking foot, because I do not have a model that has the better feed dogs with it. So in order to use this attachment, I also need to have the walking foot. The fold goes down inside this assembly, and you run it through these hook areas right through here, and it goes through the assembly, and when it comes out on the side, it turns into double fold binding. Then you're going to tightly put your quilt inside of this, inside of that double folded binding, and then you're going to sew. This is what it looks like when you're all ready to go. And you just go very slowly well, not very slowly, but slow, not at the super fast speed, so that you are making sure you have nice, pretty looking stitches. And you don't want to be pulling on your quilt. You want to direct it, but you don't want to be pulling on your quilt. I will go slow when I get to the curves, though. So when it comes out, it's looking like this. And you can see on the back, it's just perfect. So you do all this in one step. I have completed my binding. And you can see that this is what it looks like on the front. And this is what it looks like on the back. It went around those curves. Okay, you just have to go very slow. And then the way I am choosing to end it, it overlaps a little bit, and I can stitch those ends together like that on the outside, but it's folded under and it's finished. Again, you might not want to do this for a show quilt, but once I stitch that by hand right through here, I don't even think you're really going to be able to see that. So I'm really happy with how this is turning out, and this might be an option in the future for people to come and rent the machine so they can finish their quilts like this.